joined today by Pamela Nadell to discuss her new book, America's Jewish Women, A History from Colonial Times to Today. Let me start off with my first question, which is, what inspired you to write this book?
One of the stories that I tell in the introduction is I talk about the photos of my family.
Right.
This photo of my great-grandmother, and she's dressed very old-fashioned. She wears a wig like married Jewish women would wear. And then I talk about how the clothing and the images changed over the generations and how they drew me into the story. And it's a great opening for a book that wants to appeal to a wider audience.
Right.
For my colleagues in the history department, what I would say is I've been thinking about writing this book for almost my entire life.
Right. Sounds like it was a very personal inspiration then as
Yeah.
well. Yeah. Now, you cover such a broad swath of time, place, and class as well. You examine women, Jewish American women from all different classes of society, all geographic areas, and over a 200-300 time period as well. How do you find sort of a common thread of a Jewish American identity for the women, because their experiences seem to be so diverse?
Right, and that was one of the points that I emphasized, is that it's very hard to categorize all American Jewish women in the same way. One of the things that I do emphasize is the fact that they were Jewish always mattered.
Yeah.
Even if it didn't matter to them, it mattered to others. So I was looking, as a result, for what was significant about being Jewish.
Right.
And ultimately what I found was that the women all exhibit a very strong sense of self, at least the ones that I chose to write about. And that also one theme that jumps out is Jewish women's social activism.
Right. That's actually one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, is that many of the women that you examine, they seem like they're engaging in social and political activism, oftentimes outside of the Jewish community.
Right.
In what ways do you think that their Jewish identity informed that social activism, even when it wasn't activism necessarily on behalf of a Jewish community?
I'm actually convinced that Jewish women's Judaism or sense of Jewishness, and those are actually, I see as two different things, very much propelled them to social justice work and to activism. And I see it also not only outside the Jewish community, I see it inside the Jewish community, and I see it also in terms of within Judaism, within the faith as well. And it's really striking if you think about an early figure like 19th century figure Rebecca Gratz. One of her activities is founding Jewish orphanages, and another one is founding a Hebrew Sunday school, and that's also a kind of activism.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of factors that drove them to do this. One is the Jewish tradition has a strong mandate that says justice, you shall pursue, and that became increasingly emphasized in American Judaism. Especially over the course of the 20th century. That drove some. Frankly, what drove some others is that they grew up in leftist homes. There were considerable numbers of Jews who embraced leftist politics.
Right. Yeah.
And that, again, similar kind of politics demanding social justice, and that propelled some others. Certainly when we get to after World War II, memory of the Holocaust also drove some to social justice causes.
Of all the stories that you cover here, was there any one that particularly resonated with you in some way?
I think what happens when we write our books is that certain figures become dear to us, and we don't want to have favorites, but we're parents and we've got all of these children, and one figure that I've always been so drawn to is Carolyn Hamlin Spiegel, and she was the wife of a German Jew. They married before the Civil War, and Carolyn Hamlin's family, it dates back to the 17th century in America. She marries Marcus Spiegel, and he was a German Jewish peddler. And they met somewhere on the byways of Ohio. And what strikes me about her are a couple of things. First of all, she converted to Judaism for her husband. And we actually have her conversion certificate, so we have some interesting documentation. What also strikes me about her story is we have the letters that he wrote to her, but we don't have the letters that she wrote to him. But in his letters, he would say things like, "I'm sorry you're feeling blue," which meant that she wrote to him that she was feeling blue.
Right.
So I teased her voice out of his letters, And I'm very proud of that accomplishment.
Yeah. It's very satisfying to be able to recover the voice of the voiceless.
Right,
When
exactly.
you don't actually have it from those people, but you can get it through other sources in indirect ways. Well, I think this is a fascinating book to read. It's getting a lot of attention, and I hope many more people will be drawn to read it as a result. So thank you for sitting down with me today.
Thanks, my pleasure.